Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we have about 26 participants on the line. I'm going to give it just one more minute before we get started, so anyone who may be a little late can jump on before we start talking. If folks wouldn't mind muting their lines until we get to the point where you might need to talk, that would be great. All right, it looks like we've got about 31 people on the line, so let's go ahead and get started. This is Jamie Line with WSP. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us again this afternoon for the second working group meeting to explore bridge bundling in Illinois. And we're going to go ahead and start with some introductions for the rest of the folks on the line today. And then after that, we're going to just do a brief recap of the first working group meeting that we had on the 21st of February. And then we're going to move into the main part of the conversation today, which is going to be with Royce Meredith of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, who's going to be talking with us about Kentucky's experience with bridge bundling. Before we do that, though, let's go ahead and just kind of go around the horn here and let folks introduce themselves. If you could say your name and your organization and the role you play, that would be great.
Hello, this is Scott Sigmund with the Illinois Soybean Association. I'm the Transportation and Infrastructure Lead, and thank you for organizing and leading this call.
Hello, this is Joe McCoy with the Illinois State Association of Counties. I appreciate the opportunity to join the call.
This is Jim Tarman with the Illinois Corn Growers Association.
Kirby Wagner with the Illinois Farm Bureau.
Doug House, Deputy Secretary of the Illinois Department of Transportation.
Kevin Arnold,
Doug Wilson, USDA Rural Development Director.
Molly Rockford, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of County Engineers.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Mike Levin, Illinois Soybean Association as well.
This is Carl Pusey, IDOT, Bureau of Bridges and Structures, Bureau Chief.
Pat Clausen, IDOT, Bureau of Bridges and Structures, Bridge Planning, Section Chief.
Holly Bieneman, IDOT, Bureau Chief of Planning.
Arlene Coker, Federal Highway Division Administrator.
Neil Adams, IDOT, Illinois Innovative Project Delivery Bureau.
Jacob Stuckey, Illinois Finance Authority.
Stefan Sek-Biram, IDOT, Bureau of Local Road, Local Program Development Section Chief.
All right, anyone else?
Royce Meredith, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet.
Hi, Roy.
And Todd Main, I'm working with Scott Sigmund on the ISA team.
All right. Okay, if we're not missing, or if we are missing anyone else, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I'll just do a little overview of the items we're going to cover today. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to just do a brief recap from the first working group meeting we had on February 21st. We do have about twice as many people on this call as we had on the first call, and so that's why we'd like to just kind of give a high-level overview again of what the initiative is here. And then we're going to go into our conversation with Royce Meredith from Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. For those of you who might not be familiar, I do just want to point out that the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is the same as a state Department of Transportation. So some of you may not be familiar with the Transportation Cabinet name, but just so you know, it is basically the same thing as the statewide Department of Transportation in any other state or like here in Illinois as well. And then after that conversation, which we hope there's a good bit of dialogue that is part of that, we will get into the next step for the meeting that will be taking place also on May 15th. Sorry, folks, the slides for some reason are advancing really slow here. There we go. Okay, so then just to kind of cover what is this working group for? Basically, we just wanted to get, you know, several folks in various capacities across the state from different areas of transportation leadership together to talk about what is bridge bundling. This is not an advocacy effort, nor is it an effort to put together a list of potential bridges anyone thinks should be bundled. It's really an education process just to get people in the state of Illinois familiar with a tool that exists in other places and is being utilized in other places across the United States. So we've got one more mechanism we can potentially put inside our toolbox when we're trying to move projects forward here in the state of Illinois. So again, it's about education and just really bringing together a group of leaders in the state to talk through, you know, what is bundling, how is it accomplished, what kind of benefits does it have. It's certainly not going to be something that's appropriate for every project, but again, it's just another tool that can be added to the toolbox. What we're hoping for from the working group is really to just kind of take some action in terms of spreading information and education about what bundling is and letting us know as part of this process, are there other folks who we should be inviting into these meetings and into this conversation, and ultimately to just gauge the interest during this process or at the end of this process in whether bundling is something that we are interested in Illinois, and if we are, is there an appropriate next step that should be taken after this education process? So why consider bundling and why now? I'm going to hand it over to Deborah Brown with WSP to run through her background and history with bundling and give you a little bit of background information on it.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jamie said, I'm Deborah Brown with WSP, and I, of course, work with Jamie. I'm part of the team supporting the effort for outreach, education, and collaboration to build understanding of the potential applicability of the bridge bundling concept for the bridge infrastructure in Illinois. You know, across the U.S., transportation infrastructure is at or nearing the end of its intended useful life. And in many instances, there's also the added impact of often irregular and inadequate maintenance practices because maintenance often competed with, you know, other financial needs across the U.S. So in many instances, we find that our critical infrastructure is classified as structurally deficient, and under restricted uses, and in some cases actually removed from service. And it's no different, as you can see by the statistics on this slide, for Illinois. Of the 26,809 bridges throughout the state, some 1 in 7 bridges need repair or replacement at an estimated cost of $4.8 billion. Of course, a lot of money. A lot of those bridges, as I mentioned, are, considered structurally deficient with posted restrictions on nearly 1,200 of those bridges. So on the next slide, we start to introduce the thinking around bridge bundling and how that can be a means of employing the concept of economies of scale to execute a single contract that will address the rehabilitation or replacement needs for multiple bridges. As we saw on the previous slide, Illinois has a lot of low-rated bridges throughout the state, particularly in rural regions of the state. Now, this doesn't mean that bridge bundling will be the silver bullet for every bridge repair that is needed in the state, but it is probably a good idea to consider this as a tool in the toolbox, because it could allow for a lot of those bridges to be fixed more quickly and less expensively than through traditional methods where you wait for adequate funding to accumulate to pay for bridge repairs on a pay-as-you-go basis. So some of the benefits that could be derived through consideration of bridge bundling are derived from its use along with alternative funding and delivery mechanisms. Bridge bundling certainly can be utilized through our traditional delivery approach of design, bid, build. Also lends itself to design build approaches where you integrate or start construction prior to completion of the actual design of the project. And it lends itself to a range of contracting and delivery options on up to and including public-private partnerships. One particular program you may be familiar with, and in case you had a chance to see a recent FHWA Build America or USDOT Build America Bureau webinar recently, Pennsylvania DOT undertook I'm still on the previous slide, undertook a P3 program to replace 558 of their structurally deficient bridges. That was a massive program, and you may hear a little bit more about that later on. But there's a wide array of applications that we've seen throughout other states that employ alternative delivery, design, bridge bundling, as well as innovative funding mechanisms. So by bundling these projects together, it's often possible to accelerate the delivery schedule for these projects. And we all know time is money. As these projects linger without a solution to advance them to completion, the cost to complete the project is exposed to inflationary pressures. And what seems exorbitantly costly today becomes even more costly tomorrow. So by combining these projects under bundled contracts, along with the alternative delivery and funding and financing approaches that I mentioned earlier, we can complete some of these projects more quickly. And then, of course, completing these bridges provides jobs for local contracting firms. It also addresses mobility gaps where there may be difficulties in accessing medical services and other services because you have interruptions in routes. So now I'm going to turn to my colleague, Mark Polston, to talk about some of the places where this has been done before. Next slide.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Mark Polston. Thank you, Deborah. And I work in our Alternative Delivery Advisory Services group at WSP. And, as Deborah mentioned, there are a lot of benefits, and several states have seen the benefits of bridge bundling. At the national level, it is recognized by FHWA and others, and just in case any of you don't know, FHWA, I'm referring to the Federal Highway Administration, is a best practice. And there is information on their website about successful outcomes in bridge bundling. You'll see those examples include the states we have listed there. Pennsylvania of course, has a very large program, and some of the other states here have had smaller programs, but have found that bundling bridges is very successful, whether at the statewide level or more regionally within states. And Royce Meredith will join us in a couple moments and share with some of the experience in Kentucky through their Bridging Kentucky program. Bridge bundling, there has been, documented time and cost savings, and quick delivery is becoming more and more important. And in the environment we're in now, and likely will be with wanting to get projects off the ground up and running, to get jobs provided and people busy working, this will become more and more important. So some of the lessons learned, it's still relatively early days, but some of the good outcomes have been to set program-wide performance targets and achieve those targets, because these are high-profile programs, and so there's tended to be a lot of review and a lot of attention, and they are tending to meet their performance targets. The programs help complete preservation and preventative maintenance actions. These, in a lot of times, they're not building new bridges, so they're replacements or they are rehabs, and so these bundling programs have worked well for those. There have been really good success stories at replacing bridges, and again, Royce can talk a little bit about that when we hear from him. Economies of scale, doing individually procured bridge replacements is not efficient. It's much more expensive, and when like structures can be bundled, there are time and funding savings that can happen. It has been found that these bundling programs are really good at accelerating project schedules. So, when we talk about a normal, kind of statewide program or county level set of programs, you often are looking many, many years out, and these bundling programs have been able to greatly accelerate delivery of these needed improvements. And by doing it, putting these bridges together in groups, whether in regional groups or statewide groups, there can be a lot of innovation, because it forces the proposers or the bidders to look at ways to achieve those economies of scale, to do the work as efficiently as possible, as quickly as possible, and in a way that delivers the best product. So the next slide. So today we're going to spend a few minutes with Royce Meredith. Royce is the lead engineer for the Bridging Kentucky program. That's Kentucky's bridge bundling program, and he has lived through the ins and outs of the program and has learned a lot. The program has been successful in delivering several hundred bridges, and I want to introduce Royce. Royce, would you introduce yourself and share a little bit of what Bridging Kentucky is, and then we'll move into some time of some question and answer with you.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bridging Kentucky, really it's a program that was started early 2018 with the legislature when it was a budget year. So they passed in our highway plan, the governor really wanted to do something about bridges, especially our smaller bridges. In Kentucky, we have about 14,000 bridges, about 9,000 are state-owned and 5,000 are county-owned. And in Kentucky, the state is responsible for inspecting those bridges. We have 120 counties, and some of our counties don't have a county engineer. So we've taken that responsibility, but it's really up to the counties to replace or rehab their bridges. So this was really an initiative by the state to try to help them out and take care of a lot of our bridges that were in bad shape. The goal was to rehab or replace 1,000 bridges. We had a roughly $700 million budget, and the goal was to get all of those let to construction within a 6-year period, so by 2024. And as I said, most of these bridges were small. The majority of these bridges were either posted for weight restrictions or they were considered in poor condition by FHWA inspection standards. So to help us do that, do you want me to get into that yet, Mark, the GEC and all of that, or?
I think we can. I think we'll talk about that as we go along. I just wanted to start out with the highlights for now.
All right.
Okay.
Those are the highlights. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know. Thanks, Roy. So I know. The genesis of the program in Kentucky was. This was a gubernatorial initiative, and my understanding is that there was a lot of local input in terms of representatives in the legislature going through and kind of choosing projects from a list. Can you just tell me a little bit about that? I think you all had a longer list of projects that you'd identified, and then that went back through the legislature and produced a kind of the final list.
Yes. The previous administration was very big on maintenance, which I really liked because I've spent most of my career here in roadway and bridge maintenance. But the cabinet, our bridge section, came up with a list of about 1,100 bridges that fit this priority. And those are the bridges that the legislature chose from to fund in the first biennium of the program. Now, the other bridges on the list were still loosely in the program, but they came up with about 340 bridges for the first biennium of the program, and that's the ones that we were instructed to go try to take care of first. All 1,100 of them were in bad shape. The 360 were, they could have been ranked first or 900s. Once the legislature got a hold of it, they sort of picked which bridges they wanted to do first. But all of the bridges needed attention.
Okay. And, what did, how did you get involved in the program?
The state highway engineer, I'd known him from previous work experience, and he knew that I really enjoyed bridges. I was the bridge engineer in our Louisville area for the state, so I was responsible for inspecting and maintaining 1,400 bridges in that Louisville area, plus some surrounding counties. So they knew that this was something I would be interested in, and they asked me if I would lead the program. And it's been very interesting and very exciting and busy. But I think we've done a lot of good with it.
Okay, well, so I have one more question then for now, and then I think Deborah is going to ask a couple of questions. In terms of, you were working in one of the district offices of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet and took on this statewide role. How did, in terms of the list of projects, was this, mostly rural? Was it a mix of urban and rural? I mean, how was that mix?
Well, as I said earlier, 5,000 of our 14,000 bridges are county owned. The other 9 are state owned. But the county bridges really about 60% of the bridges in this program were county owned. So I would say it was more rural than urban, but you know, most of Kentucky is rural for the most part until you get into the larger cities. But we didn't shy away from other small bridges in Louisville or Lexington or any other urban area we have in Kentucky. But primarily it was just on the lesser roadway systems. That, you know, no interstate bridges were in this program. No, we have parkways as well that are similar to interstates. No major river crossings. No really complex structures. They were really fairly straightforward structures. On average, 20-foot wide, 60-foot long in the whole program. That's our average bridge. So you could probably say it was more rural, just because that's where your smaller bridges are for the most part.
Okay, Deborah.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Good afternoon again, Royce. I have a question mainly about the firms that are actually doing these bundled bridge projects in Kentucky. A lot of times when we talk about innovative contracting applications, we find that there is often resistance by the local contracting entities who sometimes are concerned that, you know, these are activities where the larger firms will come in and swoop up all the business. Can you speak to the participation of the local firms, the local Kentucky-based firms in this program?
Yes. So the first thing we did after the budget was passed in April 2018, the cabinet advertised for a general engineering consultant. That's what GEC means. And essentially that is a group of consultants, not contractors, but designers and consultants that, you know, a state can use to scale up and scale down. I know working at the transportation cabinet, I've been here about 18 years, and our numbers have done nothing but sort of dwindle over time. We have fewer and fewer employees. So we have less ability to do a lot of this stuff on our own, especially to ramp up and do this many bridges at once. So we advertised for a GEC. We had 3 applicants, and we chose the final one, which was headed up by Stantec, AECom, and QK4, which is a really local firm here in Kentucky. But aside from those 3 firms, there's about 21 total firms that make up this GEC, doing everything. The GEC for us was set up so it could do everything. Now, there are some folks in the cabinet that help us. Our bridge design folks are helping us design some bridges. They've helped us come up with some standard designs, standard drawings. Some of the districts are helping us with some right-of-way acquisition and things like that. But for the most part, this is being ran by me out of central office and driven with the GEC to strictly get bridges out and try to get these things taken care of. The GEC, like I said, obviously it handles bridge design, but it also takes care of right-of-way, utilities, roadway design if we need some, but we're trying to keep our scope smaller. Environmental is a big one. About 8 of our firms, of the 21 consultants, are environmental. And then also one of our consultants is a sort of a PR firm that does a lot of transportation work here in Kentucky and Indiana. So they've really helped us, you know, with websites and social media pages and trying to get the awareness out there to the public and what we're doing. As far as the contractors, this was being driven very hard by the governor and the administration and the transportation cabinet. So there wasn't a lot they could say about it. They just had to figure out how to adapt, really. But besides that, one thing we did do before we started letting our bundles, we went out and we did 5 industry forums, we called them. So we invited all the contractors out. We did them in different areas of the state, trying to go to them. And we just gave presentations about what, you know, the way we saw these bundles going, the way this program was going to be done, and just trying to get everybody to buy into that and assure them that everything is going to be okay.
Okay. How did it seem that the local industry was receiving the program when you first started doing your industry forums? Was there some skepticism?
Yeah, it was a big change. Historically, Kentucky has let about 50 bridges a year for replacement. And, our biennium budget had 340 for 2 years. So you can tell, you can just see what kind of an increase that is. It's nearly quadrupling what we typically would do. So, aside from just the bundling, the administration made it clear to us as well to not don't make it too big. Try to make sure you keep track of the smaller contractor as well, the folks that might do 1 or 2 bridges a year. So it was not strictly a bundling program. We had singles. Some of our bundles were as small as 2, 3 bridges. So we were, definitely told, don't squeeze out the little guy. And we tried to not do that, and I don't think we did. But the big firms, I think, or the big contractors in Kentucky at least, they've taken it and ran with it.
Okay, great. And these are Kentucky-based firms you're referencing now, right?
Kentucky-based contractors, yes.
Yeah, that's great. Mark, did you want to follow up with any additional questions?
Yeah. Were there, can you just tell us about deficient bridges that had been, either closed or marked for closure that are now reopened?
Yes. When we started this program, we had about 30 bridges that were actively closed in Kentucky. To date, we've actually, I believe, off the top of my head, I think all of them but 4 are either under construction or have been completed. I think 18 have been completed and reopened to traffic. 8 are under construction right now, and 4 of those are waiting. We've let all of them, but 4 of those are waiting to be constructed, hopefully this spring. And to give you an idea of where in Kentucky, our eastern, especially southeastern, is mountainous with the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Kentucky. And we had a very high concentration of bridges in that part of our state. We also had a secondary area in far western Kentucky near the lakes that we had a lot of bridges in as well. And especially in eastern Kentucky, we had a lot of bridges that were dead-end roads. So they would go up a holler and maybe serve 20 houses, but there's no other access in or out with a car. So that actually made up 25% of our inventory in this program, dead-end bridges. So we had, and that coupled with the fact that some of these were posted as low as 3 tons. These were really the bridge, and they were mainly county bridges in that area. They were really just the bridges that nobody wanted to fool with. It was going to be complicated no matter which way you sliced it. You got a dead-end bridge, 3 tons, very little room to work with, and really not a lot of contractors in that area. There's about 2 or 3 contractors doing bridge work in that area. So, we struggled to find low bids with those types of projects. I think.
So how did you? I mean, were those? In terms of those, that's a fairly unique kind of geography. For the bundling, were these like all individually designed, kind of with unique designs, or was the approach more for the contractors to come up with, 2 or 3 basic designs that would work for most all of the bundled bridges?
Well, I just want to be clear here that, the consultants did the design, the contractors built what they bid on. Unlike the Pennsylvania Bridge program and the Missouri Bridge program, this was ran centrally out of the state. The whole package was not turned over to a contractor / consultant to just go build and they figure it out. We were actively designing these bridges, and then we would turn them over to a contractor and we would bid them. So to speak as to 2 or 3 different types of bridges, one thing we did very early on, our bridge office is pretty, I think a lot of them, and they're pretty sharp people in the bridge office. And they had developed standard drawings for certain types of elements. They had developed a standard abutment that could be scaled, you know, to fit the width that it needed to be, standard slab bridges, standard foundation footings, standard piers. So we were able to utilize that and expand on that catalog, and that really helped us speed up design. And sometimes you might have to get in there and modify something, because one of the goals of this program was to essentially take the bridge out in the footprint it is and go back in the exact same footprint. If there wasn't a flooding problem, we are not raising the bridge, we're not lowering the bridge, we keep the same hydraulic opening. We wanted to limit our amount of right-of-way bought, we wanted to limit, which would hopefully limit our utility relocations, all of which helps keep the cost down. So that was really the biggest focus of this program, is just in and out, cut the red tape, do only what you have to do. In Kentucky, historically, we would have bridge projects that would make it into the highway plan that were funded, and they were in the highway plan because they were poor bridges. They were posted bridges. Well, after 2 or 3 years sort of being designed and having all these meetings and figuring out all these different alternates, we would end up with a $2 million roadway project with a bridge in the middle, that we were fixing an intersection down the street, or, you know, fixing sight distance here. We really lost focus that we were there to fix a bridge, not to fix the road, which really depleted the amount of bridges we could get done because we were spending money on roadways. So this program was trying to flip that completely 180 degrees and just focus on the deficient bridge. You know, try not to redesign the road like there's going to be a Walmart developed there sometime soon. Just the road is there, put the bridge back the way it needs to be, or the way it is now, just make sure it can carry the loads. So that was a big thing with this program that I think helped us save a lot of money on design.
Right, that makes sense. And just real quick, because I know Deborah has a couple questions following up on this, but you mentioned the kind of the Eastern Kentucky bridges. Was that one of the bundles? Was in that geography, or how did that work?
Yeah, we had bundles all over the state. Now, to sort of get into what we did wrong, I want to point out that November of 2019 was an election year. So I think I talked about how massive this program was compared to what we were used to, almost quadrupling the amount of bridges we do in a year, which the industry has to scale up for that. But they wanted it done yesterday, and they wanted more done almost every day. So a lot of times our bundles, we were designing what we could get designed first and moving on to the next one. So we didn't have time to strategically say, okay, well, these bridges right here are very close to each other. Let's bundle these. We were having to spread things out a little further than I would have liked to, just because I had a boss telling me, how many bridges are you letting this month? And then on top of that, we were having trouble getting good bids in April of 2019 in Eastern Kentucky. So that was the genesis for we did a design build project as part of Bridging Kentucky, mainly in Eastern Kentucky. Well, it was all in Eastern Kentucky. It was 106 bridges total. We put them together, and the real push there was to make sure that they were let before November 2019. So what ended up happening was sort of a patchwork of a design build that I believe had too much risk, and our prices went up actually with that contract. We didn't get the lower bids like we thought we were going to get.
Okay. Deborah, did you want to ask some questions?
Well, actually,
go ahead.
If you don't mind, before we jump into Deborah's next questions, and I've got one too, I just wanted to pause for a second and see if anyone else on the phone had any questions for Royce about anything he's kind of talked about so far.
Yes, this is Doug House. I was wondering, if Royce could speak to the use of design, build, and 3P, how much that came into play and what they were doing.
Well, we don't use 3P, and Mark would probably be more knowledgeable about that than I would. I don't believe can we do that in Kentucky, Mark? I know we haven't done it with the transportation projects.
Yes, there's some restrictions. There's some geographic-based restrictions on tolling, but generally, yes, P3 is permitted in Kentucky.
Okay.
But you all did.
Well,
I mean, I think you were going to start talking about some of the design build.
Yeah, the design build. I believe it was 2018 or 2009. I think it was 2018 during the legislative session. They greatly increased the amount of design build projects we could do, the total cost of a design build project. So the administration was very gung-ho with design build, and I think they really saw it as a way to get more work out there quickly. So that was why we felt like with our design build that we did in Eastern Kentucky as part of this program, we were really trying to target a situation where there weren't as many contractors and we were getting higher bids. We felt like that would be a good way to deal with that. Unfortunately, they wanted it out so quick that we weren't able to really put together a good package that eliminated the majority of the risk. Now, one thing I will say with this program as well, it's strictly not a replacement program. That's not the goal. About 30 to 35% of our bridges are going to be able to be rehabbed in some way. The majority of those we're doing superstructure replacements. So that's going to extend the life of these bridges. But in the design build, they were strictly replacements. If we got into rehabs, the scope could start to grow and prices could start to grow. So we strictly only had replacement bridges in our design build project in Eastern Kentucky.
Did you already have existing design build legislation and bridge bundling legislation, or were they tied together in some of a legislative package?
We had existing design build legislation, but like I said, it was just limited the amount of projects and the amount of value of each project you could do per year. And they increased that in 2018, which pretty much made it to where we could do as many as we want. We could do more than we really had the budget for. Now, as far as bundling, I'm pretty sure there's not a law prohibiting it. And it's, I tell people it's not a lot of different. I don't know if in Illinois you all bundle paving projects. I know here in Kentucky, the counties and even the state will put out 3 or 4 paving projects that are close to each other in proximity. And they'll let that as a package, and a contractor will bid on it, and he'll have 4 roads to repave. So really, this was very similar to that. It's just, bridges are way more expensive than paving roads. And I'll point out another thing. Mark was talking about how it's an initiative with FHWA, and that is true. It's their EDC 5. I think Every Day Counts 5, their initiative. They're really big into this. And one positive about the bundling is if you're federally funded, you're actually eligible for 85% reimbursement versus the typical 80%. It's typically an 80 FHWA, 20% state funds match, and in this case, it's actually 85% FHWA. So they're really trying to get people to do this. But as Mark said also, the data out there is limited, and it's something that people haven't been doing a lot, but it's not limited to just bridges. Seemed like there was something else. Oh, we also did a peer exchange with a couple of states when we started this program. Early on, we got with Ohio, who has done bridge bundling, particularly at a state level, but for county bridges. Georgia and New York also participated in that call, but it seemed like Ohio had the best working knowledge and had been doing it the longest, and really at a county level. So that really got more information out of them than Georgia and New York. So I would, a peer exchange we set that up through our FHWA representative, and it was done through the FHWA with the state folks telling us how they ran their programs as far as bundling bridges.
Thank you, Royce. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, this is Carl Pusey with IDOT. Royce, you mentioned that you intended in every case where the current bridge was adequate hydraulically, that you wanted to have the same footprint, just put the same size bridge back with the same hydraulic opening. Did you have problems with whatever agency regulates your water resources? Were there any problems with that approach, or did you have an agreement beforehand that was going to be allowed, or did you still have to handle those on a case-by-case basis during the design of each bridge, or how did that go?
Well, our pie in the sky idea was to keep the bridge the way it is and just replace it. But that always doesn't work. But that was the mentality we wanted to keep. We would do a level 1 hydraulic hydraulic assessment, for all the bridges, but some of them had to go to a level 2 assessment, and some of them we had to raise. But especially in some of these rural areas where we're at, especially in far western Kentucky and even in eastern Kentucky, these bridges are going to flood. They have flooded. The community is fully aware of that. You have to build some of these bridges so far. You'd have to raise them so high, it's just not practical financially. So one thing we did do to clarify our streamlining purposes is we actually created a document with the FHWA for this program, just to sort of outline what our rules were, how we operate, how our GEC operates with other partnering agencies, with the FHWA. So that document helped us sort of create the rule book, and everybody signed off on it. And from that point forward, that's how we did business. But I don't want you to think that every bridge was done that way, and we were throwing some of these regulations out the window. That's not the case for all of them, all of the bridges.
Okay.
We still had to do all of the environmental work, all of the cultural, historic, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We were still dealing with those. We have quite a few bridges that are on outstanding state resource waters. We still have to jump through all the hoops with that. We have bridges over railroads. We still have to deal with railroads. And bridging Kentucky, I think we've done it a little better, but we're still at the railroads sort of timetable. We can't speed them up very well. But what helped us with the railroads is instead of dealing with one bridge with the railroad, or maybe having 5 different bridge projects with 5 different program managers leading these, we had 5 bridges that went over the same railroad, and we had one person communicating with the railroad. So once they're done, we've got 5 bridges that we can work on. So that was a positive with sort of this bundling and programmatic approach that we were taking with this program.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Or Deborah, go ahead with yours if you'd like.
Okay, all right, I'll pose a couple more. First of all, Royce, thank you for sharing the experience with how the design build came into play in order, I think, to address some political pressures to get some projects, a package of projects underway pretty quickly. And I mean, the reality of what we do in transportation delivery is often impacted by external pressures like political pressures, where we end up doing things differently than we otherwise might, just based on optimizing the financial, technical, and strategic factors. So you may have sacrificed a little bit in terms of cost there, but are you still projecting that those projects will be delivered sooner than they otherwise might have been?
Yes, I do believe so. You know, the real reason these projects are being delivered is because the previous administration made maintenance and maintaining our existing assets a priority. But as for the design build project, it's 106 bridges, and they're getting started this spring. I think next week they're starting on their first bridge, and it's going to be 4 construction seasons. That's the time frame they have. So, you know, 106 bridges are going to be completed over the course of 4 years. So that is I feel like that's fairly aggressive.
That's huge. That's huge. Thank you. I want to circle back to your use of the GEC. Did you say there were actually county-owned bridges in the program?
Yes, 60% of the bridges in our program are county-owned. County, city, non-state owned.
Great, great. So yeah, I just wanted to focus a little bit on the fact that even though it's a state level DOT program, you as the state DOT hired a GEC to basically develop a look or actually to address locally owned assets, correct?
Correct.
Are the local governments participating in the funding or financing, or are they primarily using their regular allocations?
They are, no, this is actually the state transportation cabinet is picking up the bill on all of this for these projects.
That's great.
We have a unique relationship, and I think it's different in every state, really, from what I've been able to gather in my experience. But like I said, we inspect these bridges for the counties just to make sure that they're getting looked at properly by a trained bridge inspector. But past that, the counties are responsible to maintain them, replace them, fix them. But they do that typically outside of this program. They do that with a lot of help from the state. We have an 80-20 bridge program that they can participate in. We'll match up to $80,000 if they'll put in $20,000 for their bridges. So I feel like we subsidize a lot of their transportation needs anyway, but this case we just said we'll take it. We'll take it over. And you know, a lot of these counties they got a lot of bridges taken care of, and I know everybody's a fan of free money, so we didn't have too many county judges, which is sort of the head of the government in each county. It's the head elected official. They all really like the program.
Fantastic. Well, bridges getting done sooner than anticipated. I can see why. You mentioned that you know the number of bridges that were initially in consideration, and then you ended up with some subset of those. Can you speak a little bit about the characteristics of some of the bridges that didn't make the cut, or did they just not make the cut because they did not seem to be priorities of the local representatives?
Well, the representatives really didn't have a say in the bridges. Now, once we got going, they would reach out to us and give us some specific details or concerns about specific bridges. But overall, at a 50,000 foot view, you know, our bridge folks, our bridge maintenance and inspection folks got together and came up with this list. And like I said, it was primarily all bridges that are either posted or were considered in poor condition due to their inspection. So poor is actually an FHWA bridge inspection term. It's poor, fair, and good. And if it rates below a certain level, it's considered poor. So there's no structurally deficient term or anything like that anymore, but they're pretty much the same. So yeah.
Okay. Great. I don't want to wear you out, Royce. I know you've been talking for a long time, but I certainly do appreciate it. I'll turn it back over to Jamie and ask if there are any other questions from any of the other listeners.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. I just want to reopen it for any other questions or topics that people would like to talk about with Royce.
Yeah, hi, this is Neil Adams with IDOT. One quick question for you, Royce. I know you mentioned a $700 million budget for the bridges. Did you tap into, or did any of the consultants tap into any loan financing as they went into this?
No, we were funding it out of our general transportation fund.
Okay, yeah, that's what I assumed.
But the previous administration, like I said, was very big on maintenance. They really sort of shut down and squeezed out a lot of our sort of bypass new construction type roadway projects, and they were very focused on maintenance. So they just sort of shifted their focus onto maintenance, and that's where the money went. Maintenance type projects. They look at a bridge replacement as a maintenance activity as opposed to a new road or a new bypass or that type of project.
Okay.
So in the first biennium, they actually funded $350 million of the budget. So that's what we were working with.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But just this is Mark, just by way of background in terms of Kentucky's experience with transportation financing. Kentucky has not typically financed highway construction except in connection with a toll road. So right now there's one, the crossing over the Ohio River in Louisville on Interstate 65 is a toll bridge that is financed with federal loans and other financing. But otherwise, typically Kentucky does not, doesn't finance.
Royce,
that
this
is correct.
Scott. This is Scott Sigmund with the Soybean Association, and were there outside organizations like this? There are a whole lot of folks on the call from with the intros, a number of different organizations, not just the DOT. Did you have engagement from outside parties?
As far as to get this program going?
Well, yeah, and in the course of bridge prioritization.
No, not really as far as bridge prioritization, because like I said, it really was a numbers thing. We were trying, based on our inspection data, we were trying to get the worst bridges first. So as new bridges came online, as new bridges were posted or inspected and put in that poor condition, we would tack them on to our list of 1,000 and rescreen those bridges before the next biennium budget. And, there might be a bridge that's added and one that was very lowly prioritized that might fall off of the list. It was a very dynamic situation for us. We were not sort of beholden to fixing a certain set of bridges. We wanted to get the worst ones we could.
Thank you.
So,
Royce, are you still there?
yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. It went quiet quickly. We're approaching an hour now, so I just want to make sure that if anyone else has any other questions on the line, that you go ahead and get them on the table. Otherwise, we have recorded this discussion today, and we'll be providing a link so folks can revisit some of the topics if they'd like later. Any other questions out there? Okay,
So
hearing none.
So,
Go ahead,
Jamie,
Deborah.
so not a question per se, but I just wanted to give the floor back to Royce to share if there are any words of wisdom that he'd like to impart, or if based on what he knows now and what he's learned over the course of running this program, something that he can think of that he now knows that he wished he had known at the start.
Well, I think the only thing that I would have done different is tried to slow it down. We really ramped up towards the election, and we were told to do that, and we ended up letting 370 bridges in 14 months. So with that, I think you just need to realize what your industry is currently getting accomplished and think about that. Maybe ramp it up slowly if you're going to make it a 4-year program or a 6-year program, sort of work into it. I know the more consistency the contractors have, the better things are, because they have to hire people or buy equipment. I'm sure you all are aware of that. As soybean farmers, if you have to farm twice the amount of acres, you have to hire people or you have to buy more equipment to do it. So in Kentucky, I think we ramped up too quickly and tried to keep ramping it up, and that ultimately affected the prices we were getting on these bridges in a negative way. But I think if we were able to take a more moderate pace, take a little more time doing it, I think we could have kept the prices more stable.
It's great advice. Thank you.
And I hope this is helping you folks. I'm happy to stay on as long as people have questions. I feel like I don't have the silver bullet to give to you all, but hopefully this has helped in some small way.
Well, it's been very helpful from my perspective, Roy. So I just want to thank you very much for taking the time today. If there's anything else, please jump in.
So, quick question. Jim Tarman from the Illinois Corn Growers. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So, my question to the IDOT people from Illinois, what is in our way of moving forward with something like this? What's the process of, what's our hurdles in front of us if we wanted to start advocating for this sort of structure and funding and whatnot?
I guess I'll start out. This is Doug House. I'm Deputy Secretary of Transportation. One of the tools that they seem to utilize and have a lot of success with was not just the bundling. The largest legislative advantage that we could gain would be to have a design build option. We don't currently have that within our toolbox. It is a priority of ours to get it. But even as a priority of ours, we've not had any success in securing that design build. It could move projects more quickly and make their delivery much more economically beneficial to the state. And yet we haven't even been able to pass a design build when 47, 48 other states have it. And so, that would be a big tool that we would like to have that we don't. And it would aid us in the bundling. Generally, as a philosophy, we're open to the idea of helping to facilitate and do some bundling and even taking part in that potentially ourselves as it got moving. But the design build is a big piece of this, at least in our world, and we would greatly welcome help from the various partners on the line today in helping to see that takes place. Anyone else from IDOT have any? Does that make sense or?
Yeah, I think that makes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, I think, I think that does make sense. It's something we've been discussing internally and we probably need to do some more analysis on. And we'd also like to make sure we're hearing from our county partners and working with them to make sure they're included in this discussion.
Any other questions or comments?
So Jim Tarman from Illinois Corn Growers again. So does the state of Illinois have the capability of accepting private funds to do public projects?
Nathan, can you address that? Nate?
Neil, are you on?
Neil, I'm sorry.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at alternative project delivery, yeah, we would, for a P3, there's the opportunity for private funding or equity to be put into a particular project. So that's, kind of the main thing with regard to establishing a public-private partnership. So not only would there be funding from the private sector, there'd be also public funding in a sense, and also the opportunity for consultants to tap into, the federal loans that are very low rates with regard to P3 and alternative project delivery.
We would also though need a resolution from the General Assembly, correct? In order to enter into a public-private partnership.
Correct.
Correct.
So
Jim.
And just so everyone's aware, we unlike many of the other states in the U.S., a lot of the states had, specific legislation for CMGC or design build before they obtained P3 legislation. Here in Illinois, I think, and this is my own perspective, but I think we did it a little bit differently. We went for P3 legislation first, and now we're in a sense kind of backtracking with regard to CMGC or design build specific legislation. So keep that in mind as well.
I also wanted to point out that while Neil mentioned the combination of the P3 approach being supported as well or being financed as well through some of the federal low-cost loan programs, those programs are also available absent an actual P3 approach. The TIFIA program has a rural funding or financing set aside, and USDA also has financing available for rural transportation infrastructure projects. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those alternative financing tools in another session.
Yeah, and just
exactly.
on just piggy off, sorry, Jamie, but on the federal financing note, I mean, the TIFIA credit program interest rate for rural projects right now is 0.63%. That's 0.63% for 35 years. It's a fixed rate for 35 years. And, so that's almost like getting a grant.
Yeah, I was just going to add that this is actually Jim's question and IDOT's response, and then the things that Deborah and Mark just said were really good segues into what we're planning to cover in upcoming conversations. We may be able to cover a little bit of that during the May session, the May webinar, but if not there, it'll be something coming shortly thereafter that, because we are in the process right now of working through what some of the legislative powers are that we have in Illinois at the state and the local level versus some of the powers that we don't have at the state and local level. So part of what we'll be doing here is sort of highlighting those as well. Any other questions for Royce? Last call on that. Okay. Well, Royce, thank you so much for spending all this time with us today. We really appreciate getting your perspective on this, and that's another thing that we plan to do here is to provide multiple perspectives of experiences that have been had across the country in terms of bridge bundling. So it sort of helps inform the group here as to the pros and cons and lessons learned, and helps us make a decision ultimately about whether this is something that we're interested in trying to move forward with at some point here in the state. Are there any other questions or discussion that anyone would like to have today? It doesn't have to be necessarily related to the things we discussed with Royce, but any other topics in general, particularly anything that you'd like us to make sure we're covering during the May 15th webinar. Again, our approach for that one is to have probably another potential presentation, and then also to start discussing some of the other federal funding programs out there, as well as some of the legislative issues that we need to address. Anything else anyone wants to add to that agenda for May 15th that we can start doing a little research on today? Okay, if anything comes up, do feel free to email us. You should have received the calendar hold, I think, already for the May 15th webinar. But between now and then, we are available to do other presentations and have other discussions on this topic. So do not hesitate to reach out to Deborah or I. Our information is at the end of the presentation here. If you would like to have a sidebar conversation, I know we've had a few of those with some of you on the phone already, and we're more than happy to do others to sort of widen the net here and make sure that we're creating a robust group. Any other topics before we sign off today? Scott, Deborah, Mark?
Nothing else for me.
I want to thank Royce again for his explanations and candor, and everyone else on the call for joining us and learning a little bit more about a new approach to addressing a widespread problem across Illinois.
Yeah, and again, we are recording these, and we'll be posting the link to them as well as sending out some notes for them, so we can keep the education process going.
Well, thank you all for reaching out. Hopefully this has helped, and good luck getting your bridges fixed in Illinois.
Thanks, Royce. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Royce.